go, got it.
This meeting is being recorded.
Brilliant. Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this week's supporters group Zoom meeting. We're very lucky to have the expertise this evening of Paul Harris and Paul Napper, who are with us just to have a little chat and provide a little Q&A session on, for want of a better phrase, the web of companies that Ron Martin is operating at the minute, and also to delve into a little bit of insolvency law around football clubs, if the worst were to happen, for example. So if everyone's happy, then we'll, as I know we're on a little bit of a time limit, we'll hop straight into agenda point 3, which is the two Pauls. If I hand over to Liam, as I know you've been chatting with both over the last week, if you want to give a little intro.
I have, yeah. Sorry, I'm just having my dinner while we do this. So Paul Harris is a gentleman who has reached out to the Shrimpers Trust in order to speak to us about his expertise as an insolvency lawyer. He's worked with Derby County. He's worked with the Fans Trust at Derby County and has generally worked in. He could do his own intro, I suppose, couldn't he? He's an adult. But he's been very kind enough to offer, and so he's going to come on and talk to us a little bit about the court case, about the possible outcomes of the court case, about the position that we're in. I've been providing him with information, sort of general background information on the club and the situation at the moment. But in order to sort of flesh that out, first we're going to ask Paul Napper to share with us the research that he's done on Ron Martin's sort of corporate life. Ron is known for having a very complicated corporate arrangement with different legal entities owning different things, such as the football club and Roots Hall Limited, etc. Paul, you've done quite a bit of research. Paul Napper, this is. Do you know what? There's one thing this call was missing was more Pauls on this, wasn't it? Just to make things easy. So, Paul Napper, do you want to just start rattling through a little bit some of the key points about what you found, please?
Yeah, sure. So, just as a caveat before we start, I'm not a financial accountant, and a lot of this is based on stuff that I found before a few years back when I was looking into this. And I don't know if it's good news or not, but today I found out that there's more tangled web that we seem to find ourselves in, because Jack Martin, Ron's son, has opened up a new company called Lenrose Capital Partners. But I'll get to that in a minute. What I'll do as well, with everyone's permission, is I'll send an email with all the stuff that's in it, because it's quite technical and quite complicated when you actually delve into who owns what and who's involved in what. But essentially, there's 4 groups of connected webs, if you like. The main one, obviously, is Southend United, which is 70% owned by South Eastern Leisure UK Limited, which is then owned by Mezcal Investment, which is an entity formed in the British Virgin Islands, which means you can't get any more information out of that, and Martin Dawn PLC. Martin Dawn PLC, in turn, owns several subsidiaries which are run by obviously Ron Martin. So that's one part of the jigsaw. So you've got the Southend United, SEL, Mezcal, Martin Dawn part. You've then got the Ilaunda LLP part. And Ilaunda LLP, as a limited liability partnership, has 4 subsidiaries within that, which is Roots Hall Limited, which is Thames Valley PLC, Thames Valley P2, and a company which is now dissolved, which is Tribeca Property Southend. So that's another part. Then you've got another part, which is with Allied Housing and Citizen Housing Southend. And that's kind of where Alex DeLau comes into play. And Alex DeLau has loaned Citizen Housing, as part of Allied Housing, £8 million, which now sits on the balance sheet of that. So that's all Jack Martin's thing, the Citizen Housing arrangement, and that's a complex arrangement within itself, but that's another web. And then you've got the new web, which is Lenrose Capital Partners, which is a new company set up in the last 2 weeks with Jack Martin and an Indian guy, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. Hold on 1 minute, and I'll find it. With Bharat Thakrar. And Bharat Thakrar is a bit like Ron. He owns lots of companies, all in property, but there's literally a new person involved within the web. So there's 4 different connected webs with Ron and Jack at the helm of it all. There are other obviously family members involved in parts of it. So Lounder, obviously Ron's wife's involved in, and Tom's involved in Lounder as well. But essentially it's Ron and Jack that are at the heart of all of the different webs. And because they're all interconnected, they all owe each other money. So Rootsall Limited is owed money by Southend, and Southend owes Lounder money, and it's all the various different parts owe each other money of various sorts, and some of them they keep on the balance sheet, some of them they don't, they pay back. But the other one as well is that in August last year, a lot of the charges which were registered against various parts of different companies were all paid off and satisfied by CBRE. And CBRE, obviously, it's a big building company. They've got their own loan services company, and they've now got charges against mainly the Lounder set of connected companies. So Lounder, they've got charges brought against them by CBRE, but also Rootsall Limited and Thames Valley. And also Lounder have got charges themselves against Rootsall and Thames Valley and Thames Valley too. So yeah, that's basically at a top level. But obviously I can share the document which has more and more information about who owes who within those companies. And the fact of the matter is that Southend and Martin Dawn are like 2 years late with their accounts. So we don't know exactly what the deal is with those in specifically, but the Lounder and all the Jack Martin stuff is all up to date. So all the stuff that they've done is completely up to date, and we can see where we are with that. But it's the South United stuff, Martin Dawn stuff, we don't quite know what the issue is.
Paul, is there anything that's sort of given you enormous cause for concern, or do you in finding out a lot of this sort of stuff, or is it just a case of laying it all out so that it can be seen?
It's a case of laying it all out so it can be seen. I think there's 2 things which, there's 2 things really which concern me. Is that one is that the Mezcal, no one really knows how, we owe Mezcal only £1 million, but eventually they can't be traced. No one knows who the ultimate owner is. I assume it's Ron, but we don't know. And the other obviously is the lateness of the accounts of the club and Martin Dawn. We don't really know what's going on. So even though we can say, oh, this much is owed and that much is owed and this is what's going on here, there's a lot of stuff we're still not quite clear about. That's really the cause of concern, because we don't know how much we're losing. We can guess, but we don't know.
These companies have essentially subsidised Southend over the years. I know that Southeastern Leisure have they've written off a fair amount of money and they've put in a fair amount of money. Paul Harris, this sort of comes on to what we've been talking about over the last few days. There's some concern with the upcoming court case that, there's some ambiguity about liquidation or administration as a possible outcome. Obviously, Ron finding the money as a third option, but there's been some ambiguity about liquidation and administration because he is a creditor to himself. Is there any clarity that you can provide based on what you've seen over the last couple of days that might help us understand what a likely or potential outcome might be on the 1st of March?
Yes.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, that Paul. Sorry, I thought you were.
This is bound to happen. This is bound to happen.
No, it's whoever. Who do you want, Liam?
Mr. Harris, please.
Right. Okay. Without belittling the situation, it's fairly simple from my point of view. What I would say is I can't give any detailed advice this evening. I can just give you a broad brush explanation. And I will not be specific about any particular individual because I don't have enough information to do so. I think the crux of the issue, which Liam has provided to me this afternoon, and I must say Liam has been excellent in the information that he's provided and has responded to my request very promptly. It does appear that the club have to be in existence for the planning permission. So that is a big bonus. Now, the only solution to the hearing on the 1st of March is the directors, the company coming up with the funds to pay off the winding up petition, or prior to that date, the company goes into administration. Obviously, it would seem very strange if someone doesn't come up with the funds if it's a condition of the planning permission that the football club has got to be in existence. Because bearing in mind the value of the development, then it just doesn't make sense at all. However, if someone wanted to do something with the HMRC debt, then administration is a possibility. Now, I don't think the directors at the moment would necessarily want to put the company in administration and lose control, because that would be very dangerous for them. What they could do is enter into what's called a pre-pack and agree an administration process with an insolvency practitioner and simply buy the company back straight away after it's gone into administration. And they can work out through that a restructuring proposal as far as the debts are concerned. So the cleanest way to deal with this is to come up with the funds, but there is an alternative of putting it into administration. Now, there is a big distinction between administration and liquidation. Administration means that the company can continue and it can act as it did before. As far as liquidation is concerned, that's it. Curtain. The club no longer exists, the company no longer exists, they're not in the Football League, and that is the worst case scenario. Now, I don't think the directors will want that to happen. And I say that for two reasons. The primary reason is the development. You know, who's going to say goodbye to that amount of money? But the other thing, and it is ancillary, and this is the reason why directors don't like liquidation, is because once a liquidator is appointed, they can delve into the past history of the company. They can demand to see the books and records of the company, and they can look to see if any offences have been committed under the Insolvency Act 1986. Now, I'm not suggesting in this particular scenario that they will find offences, but what I am suggesting is that that is one reason why directors vehemently avoid liquidation. Now, I've read various things, and one of them is that they don't want to pay until the last minute because they don't want to incur the interest payments. And that is actually a logical explanation for it. But they have got to make sure that they've got the funds and they've paid HMRC off before the hearing on the 1st of March. Now, it's the third hearing, and there is a saying, 3 strikes and you're out. So I can't see the hearing on the 1st of March being adjourned unless there are exceptional circumstances. It could be another judge. It was another judge last time, and they allowed a further extension. I have not got crystal ball. I don't know what the judge is going to do. I just know the normal mentality of judges in this situation, and they will turn around and say to HMRC, yes, your petition will be granted because this is the third hearing and you've still not been paid. So the bottom line is, I am actually cautiously optimistic that you will still have a football club after the 1st of March. As I say, I haven't got a crystal ball. I've been dealing with insolvency and restructuring of a whole host of companies, manufacturing, retail, hospitality, for 35 years. I've been dealing with professional football clubs for 30 years. And as Liam alluded to, the last one that I was involved in was Derby County. It doesn't matter what size the club is, it doesn't matter where they are, it is a personal thing as far as the supporters are concerned. And I understand that. I'm a football supporter myself. And as Liam informed me when we spoke at the end of last week, we have a football player in common, Stan Collingwood, and I'm not a Liverpool supporter. So that only leaves one other team. So, yeah, I'm a supporter. Yeah, I get very personal, especially when we lose in the last 300 seconds of extra time on Saturday. But I know how you guys are feeling. I know how the supporters are feeling. It is personal. It's part of your life. It's like a relative in intensive care. You hope they're going to pull through, but there's no guarantee. There are no guarantees in this, but I really would be cautiously optimistic, bearing in mind these circumstances. And I have to say, it's the most unusual set of circumstances that I've come across in 30 years.
I think Ron will probably take that as a badge of honour that he's managed to confound someone with your level of experience, Paul.
Well, yeah, but I mean, the only thing I would say, and then we touched on this briefly this afternoon, he is obviously appears to be a bit of a maverick. And the trouble with mavericks is you don't know which way they're going to go. And I saw the march through the city centre, which I thought was excellent. You know, as much publicity as possible. Just get it, you know, milk it for what it is. But I really would caution against putting too much pressure personally on Ron Martin. You know, I read about protests outside his house. I understand emotions are running terrifically high. I understand why these things take place. But I'm just talking about my experience, and it's my advice, which you may or may not choose to take, and I don't blame you if you don't take it, but I just ease off a bit on the personal front and just concentrate on, do we really want to lose this football club? Because that's what really matters at the end of the day. Everyone can hate Ron Martin, everyone can hate what he does and what he stands for, but the most important thing is the survival of your football club, and you must not lose sight of that. And I just touched on there about media attention, etc. I mean, that's the way I came across it. I read it in the paper. But you know, the PFA, you know, are very, very strong and have a great deal of influence. So you know, put as much pressure on through the PFA as you can, and the Football League as well. You know, I know Trevor Birch very well, and he is very, very passionate about his football clubs. And the last thing he likes is directors that don't play the ball. Not quite as much as the BFA hate directors, but he's someone that doesn't like maverick directors and directors that don't have the best interests of the club at heart. And that was exactly the point that came across in Derby County. You know, what Mel Morris did was not approved by the Football League. They frowned very greatly on what they did. So, oh, sorry, that's me. Back in set.
Can you see the hands up, James or Liam? Not sure who's driving this bit, but Rob's had his hand up for a while, as has Trevor.
Yeah, so bottom line is, carry on putting the pressure on, contact the Football League, contact the PFA, whatever avenues you can use for that, because you know, you really need to keep this momentum going, which you've got great momentum already. I appreciate, you know, you're all working extremely hard. Just keep pulling in the right direction.
Brilliant. Thank you, Paul. Some really interesting and sobering stuff in there. Rob, I think you had a hand up first. Did you have anything you wanted to ask or add?
Yeah, just a couple of questions, if that's okay. I'm not going to make them too sort of personal, but just as a broad point. In terms of, you mentioned earlier on about free pack administration and that being an option, Paul. Is that still an option given that the club's under a winding up petition? Is there anything that stops that? And the other question is, when can that be activated? So is there a limit as to when that administration can be sort of put in place? Can they take it right up to the 11th hour, so to speak? And then my second question after that was just in terms of the accounts and the fact that they're like 2 years overdue, is that a cause for concern in terms of being able to sort of prove that the companies are going concern moving forwards?
Yeah, as far as administration is concerned, then that can take place at the 11th hour. I mean, administrators get appointed overnight in all sorts of situations. So the timing of that, it can be right up to the last minute, and it immediately stops the winding up petition, because no legal action can be taken against the company whilst it's in administration. As far as these, sorry, can you just remind me about the second question?
Second question was just about the fact that the accounts are, I think, 2 years
No,
overdue.
sorry, yeah. As far as the accounts,
so is that a cause for concern, really, in terms of proving that the companies are going concern?
is it a cause for concern? Yes. I mean, you know, Companies House frown very much on it, and they could fine the company for not filing their accounts. Is it of concern? Well, it could be an admin error, or it could be someone doesn't want the accounts to be seen. I don't know. I haven't got the answer to that question. I'll let you decide what the answer to that question could be, but that's my answer.
Great, thanks, Paul. And then Trevor, you had your hand up too?
Yes, please. Thanks, Jane.
That's a nice view, Trevor.
Yes, that's the barge pier at Shoebury-Ness when we had just a question, actually, just more to sort of put more on the bones. Actually, you were saying that you had relative confidence that we'd still have a club come 1st of March. I've been in contact with local authority. I used to be a city councillor here up until last May. So I've been involved because the council's got some serious skin in the game of this development. I have heard today through various sources that Rob Martin actually approached the council some time ago for some funding to help out. Was rebuffed because it wasn't the right time and it wasn't appropriate at that moment to be involved. And what they're alluding to is that since then, he's not actually come back to them with a further request, which they would have expected had he been in trouble. So would your reading on the situation be pretty much the same as I've taken from that, and perhaps they've taken from that, that they looked at it as if they haven't been back, he's probably sourced the funding from elsewhere and he's probably sitting on it. Would that be your reading of the situation as well, or unless you don't want to comment on that, of course?
No, I don't mind commenting on it. Basically, Trevor, I mean, it may well be that he went to the council first because he thought he might get an interest-free loan. So you can't blame him for doing that, can you? You know, if you can get a loan interest-free rather than pay an exorbitant amount of money for bridging finance, you'll do it, won't you? Has the fact he's not gone back, is it a positive point? It could be. It could be. Or he might think, sod it, pardon my French, I've had enough, I just want to walk away from it, and I don't care what happens. I very much doubt if it's the latter point. I think I'd share your optimism as to the former point, but obviously neither you nor I have got a crystal ball as to how we know Ron Martin's thinking.
No, I don't want to be sort of overly optimistic, if you like.
No, I think
about it.
Yeah, I think you should all still express caution because no one knows what's going to happen. And let's face it, stranger things happen in life. But you know, I am cautiously optimistic, and that's saying something for me in this type of situation, because there were times during the previous 12 months with Derby County when I really thought it was going to be curtains. And you know, the prospective purchaser of that, the original purchaser, is now facing 20 years in jail for fraud in the United States. So it's a good job he wasn't the purchaser. And that was a strange situation because he paid a £1.6 million non-returnable deposit and didn't complete the sale. And it was eventually sold to a local family, and it's going from strength to strength. I mean, look at their position in League One. So, you know, if I was you guys, you know, you're still going to have your sleepless nights. You're still going to worry. That's natural. But, you know, be cautiously optimistic.
So it has been my view, Paul, as it's gone along, that I know how much skin in the game there is from everybody involved. And I mean, you're talking about just shy of a £500 million development across the two. For someone to let that go square for a couple of million is
I mean,
almost unthinkable, really.
It'd be nice for you and I to have a couple of million, wouldn't it? But You know, no one's going to walk away from that in their right mind. But you know, some people aren't in their right mind. That's society, isn't it? So we don't know, do we? The only way we'll know is up until the 1st of March, and let's hope it's shorter than longer.
Thanks for the full.
But I can't emphasise enough. Talk to the PFA, talk to the Football League, and get them to put pressure on Ron Martin.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, James.
No worries. Thanks, Trevor. Liam, you got your hand up? You on mute, mate.
Sorry, hello. Hopefully that's a bit better. Just very conscious of time, but also, Paul, I wanted to ask about pre-pack administration. My understanding was that quite often administration was essentially a failing of leadership at a business, and the administrators would come in and run the company on those people's behalf with a view to selling the club to quite often a preferred either bidders or a preferred candidate of people that would apply to run the business. So how can it be that Ron would circumnavigate that entirely and form this pre-pack? How would he be able to, what's the mechanism for that? Because
he's in control of the assets of the company, and therefore he's in the pound seats regardless of who is appointed as administrator. So the administrators, well, first of all, Ron would approach administrators that were favourable to what he wanted to do.
So he gets to choose.
The directors or the company get to choose who the administrators are. The only people that can appoint an administrator are the company, the board of directors, which is the company, or a holder of a floating charge. So, you know, it's only a floating charge holder that can appoint an administrator if the directors don't. The creditor can't, an ordinary creditor. HMRC can't. No one else can, apart from those 3 categories.
So he'd essentially be able to arrange that with an administrator that was favourable to
easily.
him.
Yeah, they'd sit down, they'd thrash it all out, they'd decide on a price, which would be a price that he would agree to pay. They'd have to work something out as far as paying something to HMRC is concerned and to the other creditors. And then it could literally go one day and a few hours later, it could be brought back. That's how pre-packs happen. Now, I'm not saying this is a situation in which a pre-pack can happen because I don't know enough about it. All I'm saying is it is a possible scenario, but without looking into it in a lot more detail and spending a lot of money, you know, I can't specifically advise on this particular situation, but it is a possible scenario in the circumstances.
Correct.
But I don't think he'll want to do that though, if he's got the funds anyway, because if he's got the funds anyway, why incur the costs of administrators? They are very, very expensive people. I mean, the administration of Derby was £2 million. That's 2 million that the insolvency practitioner has got. Now, I'm not saying if he did a pre-pack, it's going to cost him 2 million, but it's still going to cost a fair few thousand. So why spend it if you've got the money? Okay.
Brilliant.
So basically, as I explained to Liam, and I think understand, I have to leave. So when Liam said this meeting was going ahead, I had already had a meeting this evening. So I've sent one of my colleagues along to that. So basically, I'm willing to answer any quick questions now. But if not, Liam's got my email address. Just collate some questions together and I'll gladly reply to them if I can.
Thank you very much, Paul. It's much appreciated.
Okay, no problem at all.
Yeah,
I love football like you guys.
Thanks very much, Paul.
We just support the wrong team.
Amen.
But we'll never stop, will we? So good luck, and I always look out for the results. And I was very pleased with the result on Saturday, especially with the 17-year-old scoring. It's great, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what it's all about. That's why we go back, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
I would say, Paul, you wouldn't have had Collymore without us.
Well, that's right. Yeah. No, I liked him. Yeah. Great. Cheers, chaps.
Cheers,
Thanks
Paul.
very
Thank
much,
you very
Paul.
much.
Thanks for coming along.
Cheers, Paul. Thanks.
Much
Pleasure.
appreciated.
Bye.
Right then, Liam, I don't know whether you have any thoughts on whether this agenda point, where we go next, or whether Paul Napper's coming back in.
Yeah, I appreciate that this has been a bit, because of the time constraints, this has been a bit clumsy. So thank you for bearing with and being patient, and for everyone watching as well. I think at this point, it is probably a good idea to carry on speaking to Paul. He's done a lot of work on this to try and find out, A, how we can disseminate what he's collated, and B, is Paul, have you got like a sort of Napper this time? Paul, have you got a sort of defined list of creditors to Southend as far as parent companies are concerned? Because Ron will always refer to group companies as having lent the money.
So what I'll do is I literally start working on this today, but let me show you my screen. Oh, no, you've disabled it. That's fine. I've got a Word document so far of all different companies which are which have Jack or Tom or Ron as a director, and notes against those. And obviously what I'll do is I'll put together a kind of PowerPoint with more kind of like kind of detail around that, because there's some companies which are members of each other. So Allied Housing and Citizen Housing are members of each other. So it's just very, very kind of interconnected, the whole thing. But when you look at creditors, some of the creditors aren't necessarily named. You have to kind of go through reports, in detail to find out who the creditors are and how much they owe each other. And of course, then they're 2 or 3 years out of date anyway, because the accounts are late, or it's something which is on a balance sheet from years ago. So, I've got, like I said, I've got like a Word document so far. And what I'll do is I'll put it into a spreadsheet with more kind of, different lines, dotted lines, and who's where and who owes what. Because some of them, it's ridiculous. Like Roots All Limited could owe Ilander, but Ilander will owe South United, and South United will owe Roots Hall. And it's like, well, why don't we just cut out a middleman? We know why. It's because Ron's, borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. But it's just such a mess, and now it's made even more confusing with the new company that Jack's started with this other new guy that no one's heard of. So but Alex Delau is still in the mix. As of November 2022, he signed off the confirmation statement for Allied Housing and Citizen Housing, so he's still involved. But of course he would be, because he's got £8.5 million worth of loan involved as well. So he's offered a letter of support, not wanting that money back yet, but when he does, he'll get it back. And that's kind of, so in terms of disseminating, I think it's just a case of like, I'll put something together, and whatever anyone else wants to see on there, we can kind of make it look as clear as possible for everyone, because again, there's some stuff in there which I can't make head or tail of, and some stuff which is 2 or 3 years out of date, because that's the most recent stuff we have.
I think following the money with something like this is always the most important thing to do. So the key points, I think, would be, you've grouped the entities as you talked about already in the separate webs, knowing who the directors of those companies are, and ideally knowing how much each one has borrowed off of each other. Would be a really good start, because if we can make that information sort of vaguely public, then you'd be amazed at how many people can chip in with various things and go, oh yeah, what you really want to do is look at this, and oh no, don't worry about that, here's what you need to see.
And also in a way, so just before I bring Simon in, that's also in a way, I think I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that I'd come across some of the some type-ups of some old articles from the Echo from sort of 2010 period, and that's a lot of what they did at the time when they were doing a lot more kind of news desk stuff and investigative journalism. They looked into the Weber companies quite deeply and came up with a lot of info about who had lent money where and who owed what and what charges were there. And So if we can do something like that, I think that would be really good. Simon?
Yeah, thanks, James. Just a quick question for you, Paul Napper. Is you said not only Ron and Jack, but you also mentioned Tom. Assuming you mean Tom Lawrence, our beloved CEO.
Tom Martin, Ron's other son.
Thank you. Sorry, I've misinterpreted that. Thanks, mate.
No, it's fine. Although, but Tom's is very, very small. I mean, he is a partner in Ilander. It's worth mentioning that. But he's got a couple of small. And it's interesting because when you look at Southend United, and you look at kind of who's lent money to Southend United, one of them was a company started by Tom Martin, which is in-house consultancy or something, but it's like 10 grand. So I assume, and again, this is me being cynical, I assume he got a startup loan for 10 grand and lent it to his dad to use for the club in some way, I'm guessing, but I imagine that's kind of how, there's lots of these loans within companies and within families, and that's how to get to the bottom of it all. Don't know.
Thanks, Paul. Cheers for the clarification.
Liam, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Paul, as far as you're aware, are all of these companies, apart from Southend United, are they all in the property development business? Is that their industry?
Yes. Yes, it is. Although Martin Dawn has got its own airways division, but it hasn't done anything for a while. MD Airlines, it hasn't done anything, and it's also got a coal company. But again, it hasn't.
Is that because do you reckon he set up his own business because they did flights to Oldham, didn't they, a few years ago? They would. Was it a flight to Morecambe as well? Doing flight. Couple of chartered things.
Yeah, I mean,
I remember that.
Yeah, he's had his things in it, but the weird thing is he's kept them all going. All these little companies which don't have any income, but he's kept them all going. And you've got to wonder why on earth you're keeping all these companies going as subsidiaries of Martin Dawn, unless he's borrowing money through them and channeling money. And hey, I don't want to cast aspersions into money laundering, but I don't know enough about financial stuff, but I don't know why he's kept them all going.
I could be funny and say perhaps he wanted to fly Liverpool back from Newcastle.
Maybe. Brilliant. All right, thanks, guys. That's really good information. Might be one more for you, Liam. I don't know if you is there any action that we want to take away from this week and revisit anything in the future?
Well, I think that what I will do is I will invite questions for Paul Harris that I will collate and feed back to him. Something he said, I spoke to him on the phone this afternoon, something interesting that he said was anybody that is a creditor to Southend United has the ability to attend court and speak in, I need to be really careful about this, but essentially he was like, you can be represented in court. So and he did specifically mention the fact that the trust has loaned the club 40 grand, and therefore he sort of intimated, but I might be getting this wrong, so don't, this isn't set in stone. He did intimate that the trust would be or could be represented in the High Court on the 1st of March. So I don't know what you're up to, Fitz, but if you did want to go and either advocate for not winding the club up or advocate for putting Ron out of his fucking misery, then you could probably put your hand up and speak to the judge.
So I was planning to go anyway, and I'm aware of that possibility, but we'll see.
Well, you can keep your powder dry then, can't you? It sounds like loads of us are going. Anna first going. I'm going. You're going. We should all go.
I'm hoping it's going to be canned before then, but if not, I'll definitely be there.
Opportunity to run a coach here, Ken.
Sorry, Rob has his hands up. We're all pushing in.
Yeah, no, sorry. It was only just in terms of actions. I know Paul Harris mentioned, I know you mentioned the Football League, but we know it's National League and the PFA. And there's been a bit of talk about, obviously, the terms of the wages and whether the PFA have any, whether they cover National League football as opposed to Football League, Premier League. So are there any actions there for us to contact either of those organisations?
I don't really know. I open that up to anyone else who wants to. I mean, it's a funny one with the PFA. I keep hearing that their jurisdiction, as it were, doesn't kind of stretch down to our level. But I thought, you know, as long as it's a professional footballer, then they can be represented. I don't know. Invite anyone else to come in on that.
It's just the union, isn't it? The PFA is just the players' union, so you have to be a member of it. But some players will and some players won't, I assume.
Yeah.
I believe they're automatically enrolled as a member of the PFA, and I think they pay like £100 lifetime subs or something stupid like that. That's just from one of, ironically, Gary Nelson's books. As you know, I was at the hall on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, anyone, as I understand, anyone that has either been a like full-time pro or a scholar at a club, which covers some of the players that have sort of been making their way back up that we've acquired recently, I think would have the ability to have been members of the PFA. But I know there's been quite a bit of chatter about whether they do cover the National League. So, I mean, if no one else wants to take it on, I can try and just try and clarify that, whether they're aware, just really that they're aware of the situation, and whether they're doing anything. I'm happy to try and make contact.
Did you initially stretch that to the National League as well, Rob? Did you say?
And then the other thing was just obviously Paul was talking about the National League as well, and about sort of making them aware of what's going on. I mean, I'm pretty sure they're probably aware anyway. Obviously, we're under an embargo and everything, so they're pretty. So yeah, I think they're pretty versed up. So I don't know whether there's an action really for us to get involved in that. But I would say PFA just to try and clarify that they're aware of the situation and whether it comes under their jurisdiction really.
Okay, cool. If you're happy to do that, then I'll pop that down for you. An action point. Trevor?
Yeah, I did have a quick look the other day actually on the PFA website, and on the front of that, talking about membership, it does actually speak. It's a little bit ambiguous because it speaks about Premiership and Football League, but it then goes on to say any scholar or any player who has signed a professional contract is eligible to belong to the PFA. And once they are, then basically for the benefits is for life. So, and it does talk about hardship payments and so on and so forth, but it's a little bit ambiguous on the site, so it's a little bit difficult to pull down. But it does say any player that has signed a professional contract, so even down to scholar level. So, but need a little bit more digging, I think, to get to the nitty gritty of it. I think that probably needs to come from a contact directly with the PFA.
Yep. Great. Okay. Thanks, Trevor. All right, then. I'm mindful of time, so I think we'll move on from that now.
Sorry, James. Just before, sorry to tread on your toes again. If anyone, so I'm happy to collate questions on behalf of Paul Harris. Everyone on this call knows phone numbers and email addresses. If anybody watching this call wants to email allatseafanzine@hotmail.com with any questions that they might have for Paul Harris, then I will collate that and I'll just like keep a dialogue as a back and forth. And I'm happy to work with Paul Napper as well. I only really want to do anything with someone called Paul, including going to the High Court with you, Fitz. So I'll work with Paul Napper on getting as widely distributed whatever and collating and sort of presenting all the information that he's collated in as accessible way as possible, and then getting that dispersed as widely as possible.
Brilliant. Thanks, Liam. And yeah, I think it's definitely something visual on that would be really good. But huge thanks to the two Pauls, Napper and Harris, for coming on today. Some really interesting stuff, and I think bits and bobs there to be explored further for sure. So we'll move on now then, and we'll just probably quickly go over last week's actions. I think as we didn't really touch on them before bringing the two Pauls in. Just to go back then to what we kind of came out of last week with, and I'm going to kind of group them by person instead of doing them one by one. Paul Fitzgerald first. The main three, I think, that you were going to take away, or that were ongoing, should I say, were a potential meeting with Ron Martin, the format and timing, and whether anything might come out of that. Things are really fast moving, obviously, so don't really know what the kind of current position of everyone is on that at the moment. To continue inquiring about hardship at the club and to offer any help. And then the PG site services visit, potential speaking to them. Do you have an update on those three at all?
Yes, all three of them in some form. But probably just worth saying, as you know, James, we put together a long action list, including those items and many other things we were doing. It was just becoming unmanageable how much stuff was going on, and we were losing track. An awful lot of media work last week from all of us, in fact, probably. So that was pretty good. But very specifically, I contacted Ron this morning for that action point to chase and to get an update. And I'll read you what he said. Whilst I'm not prepared to make any public statements at this time, I can confirm we are making progress. So there we go. That's a really useful update 10 days before. I did inquire about hardship because Tom hadn't got back to me. I spoke to Kevin a week or so ago and bumped into him again Saturday, and he said no action required at this time, which I thought was good. Not sure what that means, but it's good, and we can, I guess, keep that action as pending depending on what happens rather than any specific. PG site I chased again and they've not got back to me. That's curious because obviously they turned up on Saturday, so I'm a bit confused about what's going on there. I'll have another go at that, but no further progress there. Shall I just talk about a couple of other things I've got from that list, or would you rather I leave that?
No, go for it.
Yeah, okay, so talk about media. The American investor that I alluded to last week, I'm talking to them tomorrow on a Zoom call. And just before this call, Tom agreed to go on that call. So that's interesting. I guess the biggest thing for last week was engaging with the council, or not initially engaging, but having many conversations about it and got some questions off to them. And Anna's involvement has generated a meeting, and Rob Polkinghorne, who some of you know, not Liam, but some of you know, he's the CEO of the council. So he's agreed to a meeting. I haven't got a time yet, but it'll be before March the 1st, I'm told by Anna. And I've had a secondary approach from an investor and his consortium in France. That's so far just been emailed to me, so follow that up. That's about it. And there were 31 other items of which we've made various progress, but probably not worth mentioning on this call at the moment. Rob, sorry, I ignored all Rob's actions, actually, so Rob will have some actions from that list as well, one of which is another call on Wednesday.
Great, thank you, Paul. I'll move over to Rob then. First one, Rob, I think and you mentioned this, I think earlier on perhaps on WhatsApp when I was chatting to you, but contact Andy from FSA. So that's all been set up now, I think, a meeting with him.
Yep, so that's all set up. There's 4 of us meeting with Andy and one of his colleagues on Wednesday evening. So we will report back once we've had that meeting, which is sort of about the current situation, Phoenix Club, contingency plans, things like that. And putting us in contact as well with other supporters groups. Sorry, we forgot that. So yeah, putting us in contact with other supporters groups, hopefully using their sort of their contact list to get in touch with people that have been in similar situations to ourselves and can give us some good advice. Probably worth touching now that we met with with the supporters group last Wednesday. That was with Torquay United. I don't think they have any problem with me mentioning this on the call. So myself, Liam, and Alan Perry from the Shrimpers Trust met with them. We just shared experiences for probably about 2 hours in the end, which was really useful. We thank them really for their time and their concern, and I'm sure they may well want to meet up with some of us on Saturday. So yeah, really positive meeting, and just talking things through. Really, I think they've had some similar type of experience. I think they're quite sort of maybe a little bit wary of what's happening at their club, and they wanted to know what we know and things like that. So yeah, really positive meeting.
Brill, thanks, Rob. Was there anything else that you wanted to update on actions-wise?
Probably the other major thing that was sort of worked on this week from a trust perspective was the letter to the all-party parliamentary group. So we had some input from, I think I'm okay to say that Mike Patterson and Sam Duckworth have been working with us on that. So that letter was publicised on Saturday morning, and it's gained some traction. Obviously, there was a question asked this afternoon by Anna Firth in Parliament, and just linking into the fan-led review and things like that. So just another sort of avenue to explore, really, was to get that out there, and thanks to everyone that publicised that and everyone that worked on that.
Brill, thank you. I know you and I were going to work on a couple of things from last week as well, and that was kind of a response, I suppose, to Ron Martin's email to BBC Essex and the historical document. I know we haven't really had a chance to speak about the historical context document, but we did kind of settle on perhaps a statement to go out with in response to Ron's comms with Glenn Speller. But then I think literally hours after you and I kind of said, yeah, okay, we're happy with this, I think that's when we found or somebody found the statement on the council website. So we haven't really spoken about it since then. I don't know whether we still think we want to go ahead with that, or whether it needs changing in light of the last few days.
Yeah, I think, I mean, what I would say just is it's obviously such a fast moving situation with, like, obviously different things happening all the time, that probably now the time for that sort of critique of Ron's comments towards BBC Essex is probably now a little bit out of date, with, as you say, with obviously the council reaction. There's questions arising from that, I guess, but yeah, I think that's probably one to park now, if you agree, because as I say, I think you obviously raise the points. Those people that have access to Shrimpers Zone can see what you put, and we didn't vary too much from that, and that summed up that was a pretty good riposte. It might have been nice to have got something out, but say with other things that are going on and other sort of media responsibilities with people, it just hasn't happened, does it? So
yeah, no, agreed. I think we can draw a line on that one now. Brilliant. And then I think the last one, really, as an ongoing one again, was to work closely with the protest group. I know Greg was invited along to this evening's meeting. I don't think he was able to make it. Paul, I think you said you might have reached out a couple of days ago, potentially, but I assume
yes,
as it was.
I did reach out, and no, there's not been any contact.
Cool. Okay. I think we'll draw a line under that one for now as well then. Brilliant. Okay, so we'll move it along again then, and the next agenda point was going to be Southend Council. So Paul, did you want to come in on that and just expand on what you sent earlier in the week?
Yeah, so it moved on quite quickly today, this one, didn't it? It was when I put the agenda, and then we had a discussion about it anyway. So so what happened here was we collected some questions, had some of our own obviously, and put them in a form to send to the council. Alan Richards, in fact, who was the guy who prepared the original document that was voted on, and then we discovered the council statement, and I think it would be fair to say that probably asked more questions than gave us answers. So we tweaked the note a little bit, sent it back out Friday. I sent a copy off to Anna, and Sunday got a note back from Anna's man, who was on the call last week, wasn't he, Emrys, saying that Rob would meet, and it's just a matter of getting a time, but committed to before March the 1st. And I guess the general theme of that is to try and delve into a bit more detail about, you know, what is contracted, because I don't think anything's contracted with Southend, although Southend United are the applicant. I don't believe any of the contracts with Southend United. Trevor may already know the answer to this question, but the contracts are presumably with property companies that Paul was alluding to earlier, and I don't know which ones they are, but there'll be Jack Martin's companies, I would think, rather than Ron's, but I just don't know. And then exploring the people call it covenant. It's not a covenant, but there are some contractual obligations in the planning around, as we know, about a football club, but you know, is it our football club or any football club? So just trying to drill into the detail of that is what we'll tend to do. And I'll, you know, obviously we'll talk after about some of these things, and you can send me more questions, and you know, if we have this meeting, then they'll get posed. That's kind of what I had to say.
Brilliant. Trevor, did you want to come in?
On mute, Trevor.
It's all right. I will unmute myself. Mouse is not behaving. Yeah, just to clarify on some of that, I've also been doing a bit of digging around, and basically the upshot of it is that it's a little bit of a strange situation. The planning application that was agreed and passed for Roots Hall to build on the current stadium has actually got a clause in there, a condition in there, whereby they could start building on the car park. There's a possibility, but they can't take anything away from the stadium or start any demolition works on the stadium in any form until Southend United have a new home to go to. So they have to have a stadium to move to that they can play in. That is quite clearly stated on that planning application, that it's Southend United Football Club. The difference is that on the Fossets, and the two applications are completely separate, is that on the Fossets development, before they can have the housing there and provide the housing, develop the housing, they have to have a stadium and they have to have a club playing in it. It doesn't specify that it's got to be Southend United. So it could be any club, it could be Southend Manor, it could be Lee Ramblers, Old South Indians, or potentially, which is quite interesting, it could potentially be a Phoenix club, but they would need a club to be playing. A football club would need to be tenant at the stadium. So these are quite interesting, and it's, you know, people are saying, oh, it's got to be Southend United in the new stadium. It hasn't necessarily got to be so, but it has got to be Southend United. Have got to have somewhere to go before they can demolish Roots Hall. So that's quite interesting. I've had that clarified today. So I had that clarified earlier. So that is where we're at. And as reading from that, and again, I've had part of that clarified, that if there is no stadium, then the planning at Fossets falls, because it's part of one entity. There has to be a stadium, and it has to have a football club in it for the housing to be built. So that would all fall apart. So in some form, that's giving me, and from what I said earlier, that I understand that the council were approached and Ron hasn't been back to them. That does give me a little bit of more confidence, if you like, that something is going to happen here to save the day, because quite simply, without something being in the stadium and without Southend moving, neither of these applications can go forward. Now, what happens with Roots Hall should Southend United cease to exist is another issue, and perhaps you can push that with Rob when you meet him on that, Paul. But I'm pleased that Rob Polkinghorne's going to meet with you. It proves that we're actually finally getting some traction there. That's been quite worrying, because my reading of the council statement that came out during the week, towards the back end of last week, was I think it took about 7 days before we became aware that it was actually out there, from looking at the dates. My reading to that, I was more concerned about what it didn't say rather than what it did say. That's the old politician in me coming through. And I do know, because I spoke to Anna on Saturday, because she came into the board, she actually walked to me with the game. She had similar feelings about that it was more what it didn't say than what it did. So I'm pleased that she's got some traction, or it appears that through her office we've got some traction to get in to the council, because the council have got serious skin in the game on this. It's there's quite a lot riding on this development, as I alluded to Paul previously with Paul Harris. It is a serious big development in the town. But anyway, we'll see where we go from there now. So I'll keep my ears open. We'll go from there. Incidentally, going away from this, out of interest, it's of interest that PGS turned up in such a big way as they did on Saturday. Channel 4 News were in the pub and doing a load of interviews and everything else. But PGS, a couple of guys from PGS turned up at Blue Boar and actually stuck £500 behind the bar to buy everybody in the pub a drink. So they came up, they were making it quite obvious that they were about, and they were putting money about. So who knows? I don't know which way to read that, but there you go. So, anyway, that's my bit.
Brilliant, thanks, Trevor. I think they had a photo call on the pitch with Tom Lawrence as well at half time. So yeah, not too sure what that was all about, but hopefully Paul can make some headway in trying to contact them. Ken, did you have something to come in on? You're on mute, Ken.
Got the same problems as Trevor has. Just going back to what you were saying there, Trevor, are you, first of all, if it is what you said about the building and the car park, presumably there must be some allowance for access to the club, firstly. Secondly, I just wondered, with the further delay that's caused with the new planning permission, did you read anything into that, or is he as sort of disappointed that I am about the lack of permission by knocking it down to a 16,250,000 capacity? I think that was a figure for 16,250. Just wonder what your thoughts were on that, Trevor, and anybody else, of course.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, actually. I forgot to mention that. I've actually been told that the stadium is ready to go, basically. Now, I'll say the stadium is ready to go. A stadium is ready to go, and it's the original stadium. Those plans have been passed. They're ready. Potentially, if they get the finances in place to release the monies, the occupation of the training ground, boots and laces start to come down, blah blah blah. Potentially, they can start that tomorrow if they can get their ducks in a line. That's all ready to go. That's passed. It's approved. It's all done, dusted. What isn't done and dusted is whether that's the stadium that Ron wants to build. Now, the new stadium that was, or the new plans for the stadium, which was reduced from, and that's the 22,000 seater with the hotel and everything else. Now we know they've already said that they don't want the hotel. The fact of moving it down to, I think it's down to 17,000 now, or maybe a little bit below that, but I think it was 17,000. There's a little bit of nuance in that part of that original application for the Fossett's Farm stated that there had to be a capacity of, I think it was 13,600 available to class it as being fit for Southend United to go and play in. I think it was 13,600. It might have been 16,300, but
yeah, that's the three sides of it.
That was the three sides.
Phase.
Yeah, that's right. Before they could go ahead and play with that. The problem that's come about is that the new planning application, the stadium light, if you like, where there was no hotel, but a further 220 housing units in the stadium in place of the hotel, that was deemed, or is deemed, to be a major change to the plans. I think, I'm not an expert on planning law, but I think there's something around the fact that if it's going to be residential, there's different planning to whether it's going to be a hotel, short-term occupancy, so on. So that needs actually a new planning application to be approved. Now, I've been assured that the council have spoken to whoever is on that planning application, and they've made it clear that there will be nothing standing in the way, and they will do everything in their power to get it through as quickly as possible. And there shouldn't be any problems with passing those plans, because all the Section 106, all the environmental studies, everything else has already been done. So there shouldn't really be a major issue about getting that through in double quick time. However, as I understand it, up until today, they've not received an application. So it is squarely, it would appear that it is squarely down to the football club or Ron, whoever is driving that application, to get it in. And to date, it has not been received as far as I'm aware. That's the latest information that I've had. So that's where we are. So basically, the information that I'm getting back from various places surrounding the council is that it's squarely in the club's court now, and someone has actually said to me today, we don't know why. So read into that what you will. I don't know where that goes.
That's interesting info, Trevor, because I thought that the plans for the capacity reduced stadium had been registered. I thought I'd seen a link to them.
Yeah, I felt the same, but whether this is a yet another application that's got in or not, James, I don't know, to be perfectly honest. I'm told that there's the smaller stadium that was seen as a not just a minor amendment. It couldn't go through as an amended application, which you thought it probably could do. And I thought it probably might well be able to, but I've been told that it can't go through as an amended. So
yeah, I think that's what he intimated at one stage as well, as it would be a the original planning permission would stand, but they would just swap out the elements that were changing and swap in the replacements, and there wouldn't need to be any major kind of facelift to or resubmitting of plans. But it seems like that's not the case. So
well, I think that will be largely the process, that it will be a swapping in and out of things, because everything else that surrounds, you know, like the archaeological surveys, the environmental studies, all of that sort of stuff, still holds true, whether it's a slightly bigger stadium or a slightly smaller stadium, you know, because that goes to the site basically rather than to the stadium itself. So it should be a fairly straightforward process to have done, and I think that's what they're saying. It should be fairly straightforward, but it does need formalisation to actually be proper.
I have to have a look at what it is that's registered on the planning portal then, because there's definitely some replacement application on there. So as you said, I don't know whether a third one's gone in or what.
Mm.
It's interesting what you said as well about a minimum capacity being needed to be seen as fit for the club for the 3 sides as well. I'm guessing that will change with the new application, because I believe the 3-sided stadium is going to be between 10 and 11 for the 3 sides.
Yeah. I mean that's a planning condition in the original planning application that would have to be varied again. So obviously, you know, if that condition was almost as big as the new stadium, then obviously that's not a viable alternative. With regard to what you said, Ken, about the about being able to build on the car park, that is, you know, that is not unusual for people to start building in a corner. They can start doing groundworks and things like that. I mean, the people who should be concerned about that when we get to that stage is probably the people who have got season tickets for the car park in the car park. You know, so I mean that was a condition that is put in place on that planning application at Roots Hall. So they can start work on that, but they can't touch the stadium or its facilities. So you know, and obviously access and everything else and safety around that will all be taken part of with normal health and safety procedures around building sites. You know, and these developments are happening. So
brilliant. All right, thank you, Trevor. Okay, Ken, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just saying it seems a little bit disappointing the runs for the club then, if we're yet again reducing the size of the stadium. Just for that long term, it's not a very good ambition. But you know, if that's what he's doing, that's what he's doing.
Yeah, indeed.
I would read into that he's not got ambitions for a Premiership club here.
Freudian slip, Trevor.
No, I'm not talking Premiership. Maybe at least get back to where we were, Championship.
Yeah, I
think is
I
think is
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I tend
there's
to
clubs
agree.
in the Championship that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Ken, because I think it was said when we had that ill-fated 1-year stint back in the Championship before, a few years back, it was said at the time that you actually need an average gate of 15,000 at home to actually sustain the income to sustain a Championship squad. And that's just to stay in the Championship, let alone think about pushing on from there. So
yeah, exactly.
So building a 16,000 seater stadium doesn't show ambition as far as I'm concerned. But
This is all a bit further down the line, but I'm pretty sure that they revised. I'm pretty sure they revised the building design for one of the ends so that it could incorporate safe standing as well. So 17,000 might be an all-seater figure, but this is all, you know, this is all pie in the sky at this point.
It's a long way down the line, and
yeah, exactly.
We wait until we see whatever's in the new planning application and whether there's any provision for expanding and things like that. But I can't even kind of wrap my head around things like that at the minute. So they're valid questions, I think. But
I agree with you. I think my attitude at the moment is let's get past 1st of March first.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. All right, guys, we'll move on then. I think we're pretty much done on kind of the bulk of the meeting. So I am very quickly just going to ask for any other business. If anyone's got anything pressing that they want to raise, just pop your hand up rather than me going to each person. Give it a few seconds, and if I don't see any hands, I'm going to move on. Fab. All right. I think there were 3 actions that have come out of this to add to the action tracker then. So there were 2 for Liam, one of which was to invite questions for Paul Harris and collate them. And another was to work with Paul Napper on perhaps something visual for the research that he's done. And then Rob, there was an additional action for yourself, which was to contact the PFA. So I think we just need to get them added to the tracker, and we're golden. Brill. All right. Thanks, everyone. I think that wraps us up for the evening. Paul, did you have...
Yeah, just one thing. I'm wondering whether we should bother next Monday, bearing in mind the timing. Might it be better to do Wednesday? I mean,
yeah,
happy to try and meet Monday, but I'm not sure what we're going to come up with 2 days to go.
No,
yeah, that sounds fair. We'll all be in the pub up in London, won't we, on Wednesday?
Maybe the third. Yeah,
we'll all do it with that hangover back on Zoom.
Yeah,
maybe make it Friday in case of hangovers.
Yeah.
Well, we can take that offline. We don't need to make that decision. I was just thinking Monday might be a tricky one.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, we can discuss that and change it maybe. Cool. All right. Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
James, for chairing this meeting again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Come in, Paul.
Well,
All right.
you have to
Cheers,
pick those
Paul.
days
Cheers, James.
carefully. If you're looking at the Friday of that week, you're supposed to be at home to Barnet.
That as well, yeah. Brilliant. All right, thanks, everyone. Feel free to stop recording, and then we can head off.